do you think that this is across industries? That means it's not only business students, business graduates, or but actually talents from across industries.
I'm not really sure actually. I'm not sure what's happening in specific industries. But I think in general, young people are seeing Asia as a place that either they'd like to go back to because they come from Asia, or a place they'd like to have an assignment in, because they know very well that when they come to be a senior executive in 10 years' time or 15 years' time, they will say, have you had experience of working in Asia? I'm sure that will be the case, by the way. I'm sure it'll be very hard to get to the top of a multinational, whatever nationality you are, if you haven't had experience of working in Asia. So Asia is being seen currently as a very, very accelerated development opportunities.
And would you say it's anywhere in Asia or any countries in particular?
Well, I mean, the places obviously that people are excited about right now are India, particularly Mumbai, if you're in the creative industry. They're interested in China, and they're interested in Singapore. I mean, those seem to be the three that I hear a lot anyway.
Hubs.
Yeah, the hubs of interest, yeah. And I think, I was just talking to Richard from IDEO, and he said, that in Shanghai at the moment, there's so much excitement about starting your own business and being an entrepreneur. And of course, that's also the case in India. That it's just seen as there's great opportunities. Yeah.
So
at a time, of course, when Europe and the West is contracting. So that's the other thing that's the other reason they're going, is that there aren't really that many opportunities at the moment in the West.
I see. Okay. Right. Then how do you think, just now you mentioned about Gen Y being a very mobile generation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think organizations need an alternative approach in terms of attracting them as compared to the previous generations?
Yeah, I mean, our research shows clearly that there's a few things that are really important for this generation. The first is, whereas I mentioned before, baby boomers, people like me, the most important thing in their life was work. They basically lived to work. This generation works to learn, not to live, to learn. So they will join a company on the basis of, what am I going to learn from you? What skills am I going to develop? And by the way, they're not so much interested in what you say in your PR, because there's a lot of transparency. They just have to Google, they just have to ask somebody already in the company and say to them, what's been your experience? And so organizations are becoming much more transparent. So it's much more difficult to pretend that things are going to happen, because they can just ask current employees, has this actually taken place? Are you really being mentored? Are you really being coached? And I think that that's going to be a huge driver for attracting the very best talent.
So it's honesty and transparency.
Yeah, I think
communication.
I think in the past, companies have got PR people in, to write their graduate spec, and it's all looked amazing and colourful, and graduates arrive and they say, it's none of these things. And now I think people don't need to read the graduate brochure. They just have to they just have to Google the name of the company, and they find out from there what it's like. Yeah.
And but what happens after perhaps the company successfully attracted the talents?
Yeah.
How do they go about retaining them?
Well, people will stay. I mean, we heard this today. Really, people leave a company because of their boss. They don't like their boss, and they mostly stay because they like working in the team they're in, and they feel as if they're learning something. And I think as long as people feel as if they're learning, and that comes out. I wrote this book called Hotspots, and it basically said, to build energy and innovation, you need to have a point of ignition. You need to have something that excites people. And I think particularly talent management these days, people want to do work that they feel is exciting, is meaningful, resonates with their own values. That's the sort of work that people will choose.
I see. So, because there's a lot of talk nowadays about companies going to CSR. Doing work for the community and so on. So do you think this is perhaps also a way to help them retain talent because of
Actually, in our own research, we found that having interesting work was more important than CSR.
Right.
You know, people given a choice between a job that was boring but had quite a lot of social responsibility associated with a job that was very interesting but didn't do very much CSR, graduates choose the one which is interesting. So, you know, one of our things, what we would say to companies is be careful that if you think it's just about CSR, that isn't going to do it. You need really, the most important thing is the job itself. And then if at the same time you're an organisation that does good, you know, we heard this morning that very nice Unilever phrase, do you remember it? Does good and it's been a long day, but you know, Unilever have a way of describing the way that they work with communities, and I think for some graduates that's very attractive. You know, it's very attractive that the work is embedded within societies, embedded within communities.
Right, but the work has to be first and foremost.
That's the most important thing, and that's more important than pay. Actually, I mean, we found that that's the most important. Not just interesting, but I can learn from it, because you know, when you think about pay, then what you're doing is you're accumulating financial capital. But if you have a job that's very interesting and you learn a lot, then you're accumulating human capital. And for a graduate, the accumulation of human capital is really more important than the accumulation of financial capital, because they know in the end the thing that will give them the greatest reward is not the financial capital, particularly when interest rates are 1%. It's actually the human capital, because the acceleration of that, the interest rate. This is a good idea, actually, isn't it? Are you making a note of this? He is. The interest rate on human capital. That's good, isn't it? I hadn't thought about that before. The interest rate on human capital is greater than the interest rate on financial capital. There you go.
Okay. I think what you said just hits spot on what I believe in, because I mean, personally, the jobs that I choose also, first and foremost, I have to have a passion in it.
You have to be interested, don't you? Yeah. And it was interesting this morning, one of the people I was on the panel with was this guy called Richard, whatever he's called, from IDO. Richard Kelly. And people, one of the questions to him was, in fact my question to him was, what's the one message that you would give to people? And he said, choose work that you have a passion in. Choose work that you're passionate about. And I think that this generation are more clued up to that than we were. I think we tended to choose brands, choose companies that you think are safe and a big brand. Whereas I think now people are much more interested in choosing work that's interesting, and they care less about the name of the company. Yeah.
That's very true. But could it be due to, the difference in generational beliefs and preferences? It might be due to the economic situation that the generation.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, some of this generation, the group that are graduating now, are graduating in a recession, and I'm afraid that past research has shown that people who graduate in a recession are always you may not want to tell people this, but they're always disadvantaged. It takes them a long time to pick up, because obviously, the first 5 years of your life work life is a huge opportunity for you to gain skills, and if you're not able to do that, then you don't accumulate that human capital that then allows you to do things later. So unfortunately, right now, which is why, by the way, the number of candidates for London Business School and Harvard and INSEAD has gone right up. Because people know that a good place to be in a recession is in education, not to try and get into the workforce. Yeah.